knowing that so many folks can benefit from reduced work weeks or shorter days. We had a lot of companies piloting some really interesting approaches to flexible work. Toronto Fringe laid out a hybrid work policy. There's our artistic director, Lisa Marie Di Liberto, with her little one working side by side. But also things like piloting that 5-day work week, moving away from the 6 days was a really, really popular one to try out. We're so excited this year because we're expanding. So we have received another round of funding from Women and Gender Equality Canada, as well as a Cultivate grant from the Canada Council for the Arts. And this allows us to move into music, into the screen-based media industries, and into the visual arts. So we're partnering with Women in Music Canada, Women in Film and Television Toronto, and Mothra Artist Parent Project to help us really reach into these sectors. And we're really excited because we know that, again, related to slow touring, that the music industry is really interested in how to support their artists touring. Same with film and television, knowing that lots of artists are traveling for work. So this conversation is really live, and we're really, really excited about the work that these partners are going to do. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of the things we're looking at. We're looking at building out our own set of resources. So here we have like a little example of a one-pager, artists on tour with babies and children, top tips for producers and presenters. So really trying to mine our network and bring their voices forward into these helpful, downloadable templates. And then we're really excited for the artists that are coming on board this year. Here's Cyrita Hector, who is one of our new performing arts partners, and she is going to be touring her production of Black Ballerina with her family and looking at piloting, creating care riders along with her touring work, and also looking at how to work with presenters and contract negotiations to see if care support can be rolled into that package. And there are other folks in music as well, looking at similar kinds of things, how to negotiate with agents to create these empathetic structures for touring. So we're really, really excited about this work. We have, along with Women and Gender Equality and Canada Council, also incredible support from TAPA, from the TAC, which launched this project back in 2020, and also from the Professional Association of Canadian Theatres. We're always happy to speak to folks. As I said, we know that this work is happening. And so we want to make sure we're uplifting the good work that's being done. So we're happy to chat at any time. I've just dropped our email in there and we can put it in the chat as well. We also are opening our next cohort for this Level Up initiative in spring 2025. So there's an opportunity to become a partner. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll also be spreading through the Ontario Presents Network the call for applications in the spring. Thanks very much, everyone. It's really nice to be here with such an incredible panel, and I'm really looking forward to more of this conversation. Thanks, Kaylee.
Thank you so much, Susie. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I love everything you guys are doing. I think it's fabulous, and I want to state again, everyone, please go check out the Balancing Act website. You can become a member, and they have a free level of membership where you can see all of the resources and the examples of things that people have been trying. I think it's so great. I think the 5-day rehearsal week is kind of a no-brainer, and but it's also a huge change at the same time, and I'm so glad to see people pursuing that. I also want to highlight that you talked about the importance of just communication. I think I've learned in learning about accessibility of all kinds in this work, just communication makes a huge difference, and that's free. Just to create that resource guide for parents that are either visiting touring artists or for an audience coming with kids, just explaining what to expect or what resources are there. That kind of thing can make a big difference. So love all of that. Thank you. Okay, I am so excited for next speaker, but I think we're at our halfway mark, so I'm going to give us all a 5-minute break, a little breather. I like to go into breaks reminding people that you don't have to check your email. You're still in a meeting. You can use this time to just have a snack or check in with your body or whatever you need. Um, and I will see you back at 2:05 and we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you guys. Googling around to, oh, thank you, Deb. I was Googling around to find out who else in the world is working on these kinds of ideas and strategies. And I was particularly looking into touring, specifically how we're supporting touring artists, because touring is like such an emotionally and physically draining thing to do, and it presents a lot of barriers and difficulties for some folks. So as I was Googling, I stumbled across the Arts Wellbeing Collective, which is based in Australia. And I'm so excited that Jim agreed to speak with us, even though it's basically the middle of the night for you. I think you're in Melbourne, is that right? Yes. Okay. So we really appreciate it. So we're going to hear about the work that the Arts Wellbeing Collective does, and I'm going to throw their link in the chat as well. They also have a ton of resources and guides that maybe Jim will tell us about, but that link is there so that you can check them out. Turn it over to you, Jim. Welcome.
Thanks, Gail. I'll just begin by sharing. So I hope everybody can see that fine.
Yeah.
Yes, my name's Jim. I'm from the Arts Wellbeing Collective. We are based in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. The non-colonial name for Melbourne is Naarm, and we have sunrising at the moment, so it's very early in the day. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians from the land that I'm coming to from today, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. Arts Wellbeing Collective, we are an initiative of Arts Centre Melbourne, which is the largest performing arts centre in Australia, the largest and the busiest. We are an industry initiative which focuses on promoting mental health in the performing arts industry, and we are slowly starting to extend our reach beyond the performing arts. We have a commitment to co-design and to incorporating lived experience. We focus on workplace specificity in the creative industries, but we do it from a strengths basis. So mental health conversations can be quite challenging and difficult. We are very much looking toward positive, systematic cultural change within organisations. Our contact details are at the bottom of this slide. If at the end of this presentation you'd like to reach out, please do. We're always eager for a chat and learning new perspectives from other places. So it's probably a good place to start is what is mental health? So we use the World Health Organization's definition of mental health. So that focuses on well-being and acknowledges that everybody has mental health. It's like physical health. It needs exercise, just like physical health. The more you invest in your mental health, the better the longer-term payoff will be. We often like to describe mental health in workplaces as having something left in the tank when you go home from your workday, so that you can be there for your family and friends and neighbours and have something left over, not feel completely drained. mental health operates in a continuum. That continuum can change during the day, week, year. For most people, it does. So the more time that we can spend in the thriving green space of this continuum, the better we are. Some of the stats I'm going to incorporate to this presentation are very specific to Australia, but I understand that mental health situation in Canada and much of the English-speaking world is quite similar. Yeah. So in Australia, mental illness, that's the debilitating side of mental health. That's where diagnosis comes into the fray. It's usually where people have a period of 2 weeks or more when they're really not able to operate at anything approaching their usual standard. So 1 in 5 Australians will experience mental health at any particular time. The main diagnosis areas in this country are anxiety, depression, and substance use. Substance use is a particularly unusual disorder because it can be both a symptom and a contributor to anxiety and depression. So it inhabits quite an unusual space in comparison to the others. We also know that mental health disorders often become evident at quite a young age. So as many protections that can be put in place for young people, the better. We also know that particular communities are especially vulnerable. So First Nations people, people with disabilities, LGBTIQ, women between the ages of 18 and 29, all those groups have much higher rates of mental health challenges than the general population. Concerningly, the mental health challenges that face those that work in the arts sector are so much more acute. Part of what helped establish Arts Wellbeing Collective was a 2006 survey, which really was the first signpost for the difference between creative industry workers and the general population. Since that initial survey, another survey was done in 2022 at the end of the pandemic. Some of the stats in that were probably as a result of the pandemic. For those who don't know, Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world during the pandemic. So our arts and culture industry was entirely decimated. The Support Act have done a subsequent 2024 survey, which has seen some improvement in those statistics, but they're still way above those of the general population. So more than half of arts workers, that's not just creatives, there's people in marketing, front of house, behind the stage, more than half had high or very high levels of psychological distress, which is 4 times the rate of the general population. More than half had suicidal thoughts. And over a third have a current mental health condition, which is far higher, again, than the general population. Only 1 in 5 said they felt safe at work all the time, which is a frightening statistic. More than half said that the workplaces are starting to take action on these areas, which is good, but there's still so much work that needs to be done. I'm not sure if it's the same in the Canadian context, but in Australian industrial law, employers have an obligation to provide psychologically safe workplaces. How that is defined and how that is reported is still contentious in our industrial relations law, and changes are likely to happen in the near future. Also, because of the low income of many arts workers, they are really struggling to find mental health support. It can be very burdensome, very costly, and it can be quite a long time before you can actually see a clinician. So these statistics came from surveys that were done in April and May this year, with over 1,500 respondents across the music and creative industries more broadly. In our work, we adopt a framework. It's an evidence-based framework from Dr. Jardin at the University of Melbourne, which is called Me, We, Us. So if ever you're on tour and you're catching a flight, the flight attendant is likely to instruct you, in case there is an emergency, instruct you to look after yourself first with your face mask and life vest before looking at everybody else. That's very similar to mental health. Before we can be there for our colleagues and co-workers in our workplace, we really need to be sure that we've looked after ourselves and we are in a robust place that we can deal with other people's problems. The we in this scenario is usually our team members, potentially the people who are on tour, we are on tour with, and the us is our whole organisation. We find in the perfect storm of mental health challenges that the performing arts sector gives us, from late nights, time away from loved ones, some of the super egos that exist in the industry, we find this framework incredibly valuable as a guiding principle for a lot of our work. This slide presents basically what mentally healthy workplaces can feel like. Above the line, you have all those positive feelings. I'm sure if you've worked in the industry for a long time, hopefully at some point, you've worked in an environment where you felt these emotions. Perhaps not all the time, hopefully most of the time. And those categories in grey below the line, we're probably also familiar with. So we aim in our work to provide guidance that can keep people above the line most of the time. So when we're assessing where our organisations are at, we also use the same sort of mental health spectrum as I showed earlier. Hopefully organisations at the dark green generative end, working in tight consultation with their workforces, taking on board different suggestions, and keeping ahead of the curve, because mental health challenges are always moving. One of the reasons we like working in the creative industries is because we're always doing something new, and part of doing that means that we're always kind of pushing the boundaries of how to work safely and in a mentally healthy manner. Our industry has a long history of the show must go on, which is a saying that hopefully is dropping by the wayside quickly, but it can create inordinate mental health damage to a lot of people that work in our industry. There is a middle space. So if you're assessing where your organisation is, realistically, you're probably somewhere around the middle, and in need of more focus to get up into that dark green area. We run training programs. So we use our me, we, us framework to determine what those training programs look like. Some of those are quite introductory, really 2-hour light touch sessions, introducing people to some of the more challenging concepts around mental health. Whereas some of them are a lot more immersive, like on the bottom line there, our 1 and 2 day self-care and mental health first aid courses are really quite immersive. We don't necessarily have the expectation that everybody in a workplace does those courses, but that there be a ratio of maybe 1 per 20 people so that they can then be resources for their colleagues. Our Creating Mentally Healthy Workplaces for our course in the Us column is specifically designed for leaders, decision makers, and those aspiring to those roles, those people that can have influence over policies and procedures within organisations that can impact the lives of many more of their staff. Our training program is fee for service, but a bunch of our other resources are totally free and available on our website. We have a mental health matinee series where once every 3 months or so, we run a webinar on issues that the industry tells us are of significant concern. And then at some duration after the initial webinar, we archive them amongst our mental health matinees. Some of our recent topics have included an anti-fatigue toolkit, imposter syndrome, which is something that many people that work in the industry have told us they've felt at one point or another. And next Wednesday, Melbourne time, we have an accessible castings and call-outs webinar. We also provide a lot of different free resources in different formats because we know people learn differently. So we have podcasts, we have meditations that are available on our website. So pre-performance meditations. And we have a series called the Well Guides, which is probably our most popular series. And we released our most popular of the Well Guides earlier this year, which is a career planning tool called Navigate Well. It's also good for those that are further in their careers to take some time out and review their directions. And yeah, obviously I'm longer in the tooth and not an emerging artist, but I found this resource incredibly useful myself. Most of our resources are developed by matching performing arts workers with mental health practitioners. So they're evidence-based, and then we put a lot of effort into making sure they have the highest level of usability, that they're easy to understand and digest. 3 that are particularly pertinent to this group are firstly, our 2 Tour Well resources. So the first Tour Well is specific to people who are going on tour themselves, perhaps for the first time, but also useful for those that have been on tour many times. It provides really simple things like packing lists and suggestions like taking a playlist of your favourite music so that you don't feel as though your routines are getting shaken up too much. The second Tour Well resource is specific for tour managers and tour producers and details the structures that they can put in place that can make the whole experience more pleasurable for everybody that's on the tour. And then we also have our Work Well guide, which is about creating mentally healthy workplaces. That matches the training course, so it does put quite an emphasis on leadership, but it's full of great suggestions for anybody in a arts or creative industry workplace. With all of our topics, we also include references to support. So mental health can be a tricky and sometimes triggering topic. We work really closely with Support Act, which is a music charity based in Australia that run a 24-hour helpline for creative workers. People who are calling don't necessarily need to be in work, because many of us are freelancing and we spend time working in other sectors, not just the creative industry. But people that access this helpline can get 12 counselling sessions for free. And there are specific areas within the helpline for First Nations people, for arts managers, for gender diverse, etc. There's also Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander specific helpline that we recommend, 113 Yarn, and a suicide helpline, Lifeline. But we always say that if people are in crisis, or if you're working with somebody who's in crisis, call the Emergency Services 000 line in Australia. I'm not sure what it is in Canada. Yeah, so that's about what we do. We're a very small team. There's 1.5 of us. We operate entirely supported through philanthropic funds. We do have a pool of subcontractors that we're incredibly reliant on their expertise. But yeah, if you're interested in chatting more about mental health in creative industry workplaces, please reach out.
Yay, thank you so much, Jim. Awesome. So yeah, thank you for throwing the link in again, Jason. Definitely recommend checking out those guides to everybody. I think, thank you for sharing, Jim. That's such an important topic. Some of those statistics, as Celie said in the chat, are very sobering. The disparity between arts workers having a higher rate of mental illness and mental health struggles compared to the overall population, that's pretty scary. I think it's in some ways indicative of like so much of the precarity in our industry. And I really appreciate that me, we, us model as well, because I think there can be an attitude that your mental health is just something that's your responsibility, and that workplaces or organizations don't have a responsibility to help. And I think you're so right. Ultimately, yes, we are all responsible for supporting ourselves, and we start from that place. But we also have a responsibility to each other to support our teams and the larger community that we work in. So thank you.
So true.
I think because we are at 2:30, what I'd love to do is go straight into questions and comments. Everyone who's here, I really welcome your thoughts. You can ask a question of any or all of the panelists. You can do that by putting your comments or questions in the chat, or by raising your hand with the Zoom raise hand function, ideally, although, let me see if I can remind myself where raise hand is. I think I would know that off the top of my head. It should be beside your name under participants. Oh, under reactions. Thank you, Nora. My gosh. Okay, so feel free to raise your hand or again, put something in the chat. And I was reminded of this last time. It's okay to sit in the silence for a minute as we reflect. So I'm not freaked out if we have a moment of silence. Nora, hello. Hey.
Hi, I might get us started. I want to thank all the speakers today and all of the work that you're doing to remind us to care for ourselves and each other in the sector. I do feel like, especially working in the arts, so much of it is considered kind of you're doing it because of your personal passions and your love. And so much of it becomes almost you're doing kind of your job plus plus plus, and it keeps expanding, and you take a lot of it on yourself, and I think we've all kind of been overworked and nearing burnout and kind of not knowing what the resources are that might be available to us. And so I definitely remember as an emerging arts manager back in the day being kind of like, well, where's my union, right? Who's protecting us? Um, I do feel like a lot of this work is happening at the grassroots levels, it sounds like, and it does feel like there are these kind of bigger art service organizations that should be maybe partnering, and maybe there's some development work that can be done kind of in tandem. I work for the Canada Council for the Arts, so maybe I should just say that as well. My areas, arts across Canada and arts abroad. This is more kind of supporting artistic practice side of things, but I came up in the industry myself, so I care about this. So just, I guess that's what I'm saying. It's maybe like sometimes I think even at this grassroots level, there's this kind of, you see the need for support, and so then you offer support, but it's kind of like unless it's coming from, unless there's other resources coming in to really bolster the work, then it's kind of, you don't have anything to give unless because you're already drained. And so I guess I'm kind of maybe saying we need to kind of dream bigger and ask for more, and like be talking to people like the future skills centers and like there are these huger, they're these big maybe government agencies and resources and potential partners that are cross-sectoral that could really kind of open up resources to really support this in a robust way. So maybe a comment more than a question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nora.
Can I just say to that in the Australian environment, one of the biggest changes that has happened recently is that our national creative industries organisation, Create Australia, has recently established an adjunct agency called Creative Workplaces, and it's very new for our territory, but their remit is just as Nora is saying. It's really taking a higher governmental instrumental maneuver in ensuring that creative industry workplaces are fair, safe, and healthy as they can be.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. The floor is open for questions or comments, or if any of the panel want to respond to each other's presentations, that's also great. Susie.
Apparently, I can't find my raise hand gesture. Thank you for seeing my hand, Kaylee. I just wanted to connect something Nora said, and also scrolling back to Emily and Jason's presentation. So thinking of partnerships, and I just wanted to say to you both, Emily and Jason, that it's really inspiring to hear about this, like a demographic that's working like out of school, like looking at how it intersects with even maybe post-secondary training. That's my words. I'm not sure if you're in that space, but it sounds like there's real activations, and that's something that Balancing Act is really interested in. I just want to shout out my colleague Margaret Evans here, producer, is also on the call, and we're really early in this space. Hi, Maggie. But really inspired to see where what happens when we move into the post-secondary arts training realm. What happens when we're looking at curriculum and how curriculum is activated to disrupt the structures. So how are we learning as artists and arts workers to do what we do, and how are those structures around it changing? So we're really interested. One really awesome nugget of hope is we're partnering with NASCAD. Upcoming, they're going to look at a student bursary for an artist caregiver. They're also going to look at building out awareness around that. We're so pleased to be working with them. But I guess maybe I'll just maybe pass over to you, Jason or Emily, if you wanted to respond to that. Thanks so much for your prompt there.
I will let Jason comment on the post-secondary portion more because his expertise also had been in experiential education and curriculum design. But what was interesting that I will note is in our sort of earlier research when everyone we've been talking to, including like council officers or previous council officers and artistic directors and program directors were like, you're in for another big burnout. Was we actually like started investigating how like the academia of arts management even started. We were like, okay, so if we can't even run a successful business, why does this field exist? So we spoke to like early founders of arts management programs and like read like the UNESCO reports that kind of started this around the world. And I think what we're like really facing is bureaucratic barriers to the kind of things that we want to say directly to students. And so when during the pandemic, the world, like physical spaces had shut down, that actually was a really ideal time for us to have our presence on social media so that people could find us. And I think the community that we've slowly been building since 2020 has grown like so big and across the country. And I think it's been like a really inspiring space and we're really open to how it could go. And I think like Susie, like and Margaret, the work you guys are doing is so interesting because not only are you providing this as a service, but you're also like contributing to the visibility of like people who do caregiving. That contributes to gender equality. And I also always think about how children are such important citizens and they're often like erased from or like public facing events and public services and seen as almost like a nuisance and like how much disservice we're doing to them. And so I think like that visibility work is also so fascinating. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed your presentation. And Jason, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Susie. I'm thinking about from the post-secondary space of arts. My background comes from supporting students who are sort of starting out in their career, and one thing that I really noticed was sort of when I think with the topic of empathy, where does that start immediately for someone, emerging artist or a student that is sort of transitioning into their early careers and sort of the barriers that I saw. So I was essentially an experiential education coordinator who was placing students in practicum settings or work integrated learning opportunities and sort of seeing how I think one thing that Emily and I kind of raised up sort of the topic of job postings. That's if we have sort of standardized job postings that we see, and students aren't seeing sort of that connection between their sort of academic experience to the job posting and sort of that transferable experience. And then with sort of the terminologies and wording, that it creates a barrier for them to adapt changes to what they're seeing. So when they look at job posting, I've been seeing some organizations with very interesting creative ways. If this was a job posting that was way more accessible with the language and with and then also sort of other creative ways just to create that warm space for someone to see and look into the organization, and that really encourages them to apply and really again feeling safe rather than sort of trying to adhere to our standard common practices of applying to a job, going through an interview and all of that. So that's one thing when it comes to job seekers that I've seen. Then on the other hand, when we talk about curriculum building is what I've been seeing is sort of we need more more organizations in the classroom. So work integrated learning experience for students to really get a sense of what arts organizations are doing. I know this is happening, but we definitely need way more for students to be more aware of the types of arts service organizations and advocacy work that's happening in the field. And so that's sort of a disconnect that I'm seeing currently. I can go on and on, but I think it's just more about the raising that awareness for students and knowing sort of the multiple career pathway. I'm sure we've never thought about being sort of where we are now in our career, sort of becoming becoming either an administrator, more focused on administration, or more focused or seeing that balance. And so I've had students come to me and in the career service space where they're just unsure because they don't see, they're not able to foresee a future of in the arts. And unless we provide them the reality, but also showing that there is a hopeful future, then that really helps them kind of understand what they're navigating. So as arts management grads like ourselves, you know, we were very positive, hopeful, but then I think the reality really hits us when we start thinking about all the things we have to do, the multiple works, multiple hats that we need, and raising that awareness to them. So that's just some things to kind of share out.
That's a lot to think about. Thank you so much. Yeah. Um, I'm going to go to Alicia's question in the chat. Alicia says, what resources are available to folks who are on tour and may want to seek support in an unfamiliar location? I'll quickly say that the resources that Jim shared that are specific to Australia, I'm going to see if I can find our Canadian equivalents and just make sure that I get that in the notes for this meeting. But I'll go to our panelists. Do you know of any resources? Is this a gap area that maybe we should be looking at for folks who are on tour looking for support?
I would like to jump in and just say, like, personally as an artist and also as like an independent producer, I have been more interested in like non-Eurocentric locations for touring and opportunities to like non-Anglo or non-Francophone locations around the world. And to find resources are actually really difficult. There are resources like Generator and a lot of like producer networks that will help share their experience. But for example, I've been working with South Korea-based artists, and we brought them to Summerworks last year and hosted them for about 2 weeks in Canada. And I had to do everything like from scratch. It's difficult to find translation resources. The Korean Cultural Center is in Ottawa, so it's not as accessible to me here in Toronto. And the consulates also like don't have much like cultural exchange infrastructure because that really began more rapidly with the last sort of Canada-Korea collaboration efforts. And so I actually didn't receive much like infrastructural support. And so it had required like a lot of really generous cross support between me and my collaborators to figure out the details. And I think like that's like a really big missing piece. But if anyone here is interested in sharing touring resources to Asia, I have started sort of a network with fellow friends called X60, and we're made up of Vietnamese, Tibetan, and myself, like artists, to have these conversations and to kind of check in and see like what opportunities have been available and what skills and grants are out there that we could access. So I'm really interested in building that network.
That's very cool, Emily. Thank you. And Jason shared a link to the Student Work Placement Program. Thank you, through the CHRC. If anyone else has links to resources that you want to drop in, feel free to put those in the chat and I'll collect them in the notes. Susie?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to thank Jim for the presentation and just connect this touring piece and just uplift a couple of things that our partners had done just around, because you had mentioned a self-care plan there, Jim, and I was brought back to this idea of a mental health support plan or care plan. MT Space, one of our partners, has a really comprehensive kind of wraparound care policy, and part of that is supporting their artists on tour with by creating individual mental health support plans in case they're needed. Also, Savage Society, one of our partners last season, also inspired by MT Space, instigated a safety plan. These are documents that are created personally by the artist or arts worker, and they can live in a number of ways, just with the artist or the arts worker, or they can live with the stage manager or the tour manager. And then there's like sort of pathways around activating those plans when and if needed. And I just appreciate so much the conversation around mental health and well-being. And I know it's so present for so many of us. And so thanks, Jim, and shout out to our partners on that and the thought.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah, I'll also add in response to Alicia's question, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. It also comes back to our last workshop, which was about hospitality and the presenter-artist relationship for presenters to hopefully see themselves as hosts, and that includes making sure that visiting artists can find resources that they need. It's not even always the presenter providing all the resources, but helping navigate that, even providing an info document of what's local that could be helpful to people. I used to do this a long time ago when I worked at Canadian State. I was in charge of the where do people go if they have a health emergency in the neighborhood? Where do the people go if they, we're hosting lots of dancers. What if they need chiropractic support or whatever it is? And that same goes for mental health. So I'd love to see, I know presenters, the thing is, a lot of you are amazing hosts and you have a lot of things available, and it can also be a disconnect of artists not knowing about them, and it's really great to play a connector role to make that available to people. And Jim has shared another resource in the chat. Thank you. Collecting all of these. Does anyone else have questions or comments or responses? The quiet group today. Well, that's all good. I have loved this conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot. I really appreciate you folks. All of you have shared really specific things with us that are initiatives that you're doing, and or that those here present today can try to take on. Whether it's around supporting caregivers, whether it's around mental health and preventing burnout and creating better workplaces for all of us. These are concrete things. There's material solutions to them, ranging from rest and approaches of care to how we change our contracts and our job postings. And so really encourage you to think of what are those small ways, even those free ways that are just about how you communicate. Think about how you can implement that, and especially if you're in leadership in an organization, but for everyone. If we all make those little changes, I think we're going to start to see an industry that is more and more empathetic. So thank you all. And Emily has shared another resource in the chat. Yes, a conference for supporting a BIPOC touring network. Definitely relevant as well. So before we go, you know what? I always forget to introduce myself in these things, and I know that it is very last minute, but I'll come back to it. For anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Kaylee Wood, and I work for Ontario Presents. I have for 9 years, and I'm currently the program lead on our Slow Touring Project. I'm putting my email in the chat if anyone has questions or wants to connect about anything related to slow touring. I'm always available to chat. We have some slow touring related resources on our website as well. And I want to give you a heads up. If you've registered for today and you're here, you're registered for this entire series. There's 3 more workshops in the series that are more or less monthly, but skipping December. So I would love to see you at our next one, where we're going to talk about art centers as community spaces. Community engagement is becoming such a huge topic, and I love that we're seeing art centers, venues, etc., see themselves as more than just, you know, a stage where you can turn the lights on for an artist and turn them off, but to really be a space for community, to engage with community, to provide different ways of interacting with arts experiences. So we're going to hear from some folks who are doing cool work in this area in making their art center a community space. I would love to see you at that. And this is the full schedule of upcoming workshops. So in February, we're going to talk about sustainability, huge part of slow touring, get into the nitty-gritty of environmental sustainability. And then possibly our most controversial topic, but so important, the value of rest, incorporating a disability justice perspective on that, but you know, something that really applies to all of us. So I'd love to see you at these upcoming workshops. You can share the link with anyone else from your team or your network that you think would be interested. All are welcome at all of these. But I'll wrap up by thanking Emily, Jason, Susie, and Jim, and Veronica, all of whom, you're all doing such great work. I admire you all, just so you know. You're here because I'm just so admiring of people that are really pushing these conversations forward. It'll probably take us about a week to get the follow-up out to everybody, but we will be sharing the recording from today, some notes, some of these links. If the presenters or if the speakers are willing to share their PowerPoints with me, I can put those in our folder as well. I appreciate all of you. And thanks again to the Canada Council for being the funder of this program. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Kaylee. Thanks, everyone.